Age community. I am Pi. You may know me, you may not. I used to be a top treaty player before I went pretty much completely inactive. I play occasionally, but not very often. And for the most part, I didn't really contribute very much to the community besides the occasional forum post flaming people. Hey, we all have our vices, right? Anyway, what I'd like to do is begin to contribute a bit more to the community. Now that I don't play as much, and I have a bit of free time occasionally, I figured I would take the time to download some replays or go through my massive collection of replays and pick out games to analyze and discuss. Now, I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on this first game, as you can see by the length of the replay, simply because I want to give people a good feel for how I'm going to do these kinds of things in the future. And I want good feedback, not just, oh, it was a boring game, or oh, your voice is dull, or some bullcrap like that. I want people to actually tell me areas to improve, whether or not they want fast-paced, action-packed games where people are all over the map, or whether they want slower, more methodical games where I really can discuss the micro and the strategies and the decision-making that's going on. The game we have today is between Milky, who is a player from New Zealand, a fairly good player. He's not an excellent player by any means, he was never a top-tier player, but he's always been consistently somewhere around a first lieutenant to captain level player. He has a fairly good understanding of a few different civs, and I would say that his British is quite well rounded. In this game, he will be playing as green and as British. Now, I want to quickly analyze his economy and tell you whether or not it's good. Next 30 villagers on food, and then he has about 80,000 food at 40. That's a fairly good amount of food. Personally, I usually was around 70k of food, because I just considered having about 45k coin to be a bit better. It's a personal taste thing. The only reason I say that worked better for me was simply because I would be constantly cowing throughout the entire battle. Some lower players are not going to be cowing constantly, so it's good to have these 30 villagers on food and 80,000 at 40 because it helps to compensate for their weaknesses. I'm perfectly okay with that because the overall distribution of resources is good. Now let's quickly analyze his opponent. His opponent is StormComing. He's, I believe, PR 21 or so, second lieutenant. I can't remember off the top of my head, and he can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I know of him, he's not a particularly notable player. I mean no offense to him, he might be great for all I know, I just haven't heard of him. His army composition here looks fairly sane, and let's quickly analyze his economy before we get into the whole fighting and etc. His economy, again, is fairly clean. The only thing that I would nitpick is that it might be a good idea to have an extra 2 or 3k of wood so that you can use natives and still forward base all over the map and get some map control early on. However, if he's fine playing a more defensive game, then not having as much wood is perfectly acceptable. I like that he has this much food because Portuguese is a civilization that really, really needs food. This seems weird because I personally constantly say civ, but you need food because your caçadores, dragoons, muskets, hussars, the things you use to tank damage and mess with your opponent, all cost a good amount of food. You need coin to support the backbone of your army, but you should be making your meat units to guard that backbone, so you shouldn't be replacing your artillery as much. That's why it's important to have a good amount of food as Portugal. And also in addition, he's going to be using natives. Oh no, wait, sorry, I forgot. This game, they're not using natives. Yeah, actually, good. Still, if you're using natives, you want to have a good amount of food so that you can actually pump natives when you need them and not have to worry about tanking your food. Again, I forgot, they're not actually using natives this game. I actually think that's a good thing between lower level players and even high level players, because it really gets you to focus on things like micromanagement and your overall army composition instead of just spamming 20 natives to make up for it. So, let's quickly look at the positioning of their armies and see if there's anything wrong there. By the way, I think both army compositions are perfectly sane. Whoops. Here we go. These hussars here are in a very good position. He can move around like this, go up here, and then flank around here and get out a lot of this artillery. It means that he can pressure any forward base that might go down here, and he can also flank around and control Milky's artillery. It's a very good thing because he doesn't want to let Milky's artillery just overwhelm him. I like that Milky has this on the side because he can use these muskets to pressure the side, to pressure villagers that would be building an FB, to pressure the natives, to do all sorts of things. And I like these two mortars because say a stable tries to mortars to pressure down the stable and then get back on the offensive. Okay, so now let's get into the fighting. I'm going to switch over to Milky's view because I'm most interested in how he plays. I know him the most, so I want to really nitpick his play. I will comment on StormComing's play and major mistakes I see in terms of micromanagement and army composition, but I'm going to focus primarily on the British. So, let's get into this. This first fight, I would expect StormComing to have a slight advantage because of this flank here. Milky has his muskets over here, like we saw earlier, so I would expect that to kind of play a role in StormComing being able to take a good position out of this fight. I don't guarantee it, but it looks like that's what's happening, although this is actually turning into a fairly even trade. Milky had much better culverin micro in the first fight as well. He also outmassed him in culverins, so he was able to take down StormComing's artillery, and actually, this is turning out to be pretty good for Milky. He still has a number of these rockets left over, which surprisingly enough do okay against cavalry if you actually shoot them instead of running them away. He should have been firing the rockets and moving his muskets up so that the rockets would be dealing damage, because they deal 450 damage per shot to a hussar. A hussar from Portuguese only has 672 hit points. A couple rocket volleys when you have 5 will kill a good amount of his hussars. I like that Milky's first reaction after he gets population is get out Huss. Why? Because hussar give you pressure. They allow you to do exactly what Milky's doing right now. Put your opponent on the back foot and punish him for making skirmishers. Because a lot of people's first reaction, oh, I need skirmishers. Then all of a sudden they get hammered with the hussars from the side. And it's just too painful to deal with. They get pushed back and their position just becomes bad. I do like that StormComing has realized that this position is screwed. He needs to distract Milky and start to push him here and get him to divide his attention so that he can actually retake this position, because he's not going to be able to directly push this. I don't necessarily disagree with players moving around the map if it's to fulfill strategic purposes, like what StormComing is doing. However, you often see players in Treaty that just move around constantly without really accomplishing anything. It's called running. Running is usually a bad idea against equal skill players because it won't work. Here though, taking this map control and then using it to split Milky apart allows him to regain his position here, distract Milky, and keep Milky from just hammering straight through. Milky's army composition is fairly good. Going musket hussar this early on is usually a good idea, and I like that he's sending these 25 Cherokee again because they're a good way to bolster your push and be aggressive. I will nitpick this. He hasn't sent advanced arsenal. I will say this again and again and again in every single VOD you see of me. You should always send advanced arsenal before 40 with every civilization. No exceptions. It improves your army so much. It improves your infantry, it improves your artillery, and it improves your cav to some extent if you're a civ that uses them for burning things down like Russia, or sometimes I see French players do it, but whatever. That's kind of retarded. It does help though. It's just the amount it impacts your infantry is, I can't even